Hello and welcome to your ultimate guide for the C273 OA, Introduction to Sociology course. My goal today is simple: give you everything you need to fully understand the key concepts, master them, and walk into your C273 OA exam with total confidence. In this video, we'll cover defining sociology, sociological imagination, theoretical perspectives, applied sociology, theory and research. And remember, our website offers free exam guides and practice questions to help you ace your C273 OA exam. You'll find the link in the description below, so be sure to check it out and get the resources you need to study smarter, not harder. So let's dive right in. Let's start with the most fundamental question. What exactly is sociology? At its core, sociology is the systematic study of social life and human society. Now, what makes sociology unique is that it's not just about individuals. It's about understanding how social forces shape our lives in ways we might not even realize. Think about it this way. Sociology looks at the patterns that emerge when humans interact with each other in groups and societies. Here's something really important to understand. Sociology has a specific perspective that sets it apart from other social sciences. Peter Berger, a famous sociologist, said that the first wisdom of sociology is that things are not what they seem. What he meant is that sociology teaches us to look beyond the surface and see the deeper social forces at work. When you're looking at any social situation, sociology asks you to find the general in the particular. Let me explain what that means with a real example. Imagine a woman loses her job. On the surface, she might think this is purely her personal problem. Maybe she wasn't good enough or didn't work hard enough. But a sociologist would look deeper and ask, what are the social forces at play here? Is there discrimination based on her race or gender? Is her industry declining? Is her community experiencing economic hardship? Does her socioeconomic class limit her opportunities? This is the essence of sociological thinking. We study individual behaviour, yes, but we're always looking for the general patterns. The social context in which people live tells us so much about who they are and why they do what they do. Society shapes the lives of people in profound ways, and sociologists want to understand this power society has in moulding our actions, thoughts, and feelings. This isn't about removing personal responsibility. It's about understanding the bigger picture. Now, you might be wondering how sociology differs from other disciplines like psychology, anthropology, or economics. This is really important for your exam, so pay close attention. Psychology focuses primarily on internal factors, what's happening inside someone's mind. Anthropology typically studies pre-industrial or developing societies. Economics focuses specifically on one social institution, the economy. Sociology is different because it focuses on external factors that shape individuals, studies industrialized societies, and examines multiple social institutions simultaneously. Let me give you another example to make this concrete. Think about vacation time. Imagine someone named Marcus sitting at his desk, staring at his calendar, trying to decide whether to take 1 week or 2 weeks of vacation. On the surface, this seems like a completely personal decision based on his unique work situation. But here's where sociology comes in and shows us something fascinating about social forces. Marcus's decision isn't just shaped by his work projects or his boss's expectations. It's shaped by deep social patterns he might not even be aware of. What's the standard amount of vacation people in his office typically take? What about his friends and neighbours who occupy a similar class position? How did people respond to the vacation he took last year? All across America, thousands of workers are making very similar decisions, and they're all influenced by the same cultural attitudes about work and leisure. Here are some facts that illustrate this beautifully. America is the only developed nation that does not guarantee paid vacation or paid holidays for workers. Americans are more likely to work at night and on weekends compared to Europeans. Only 57% of Americans who are given paid time off actually use it all, compared to 89% of French workers. These aren't isolated facts. They're all connected by the same cultural attitudes towards work and leisure that shape laws and propel individual decisions. What we just covered about the sociological perspective is exactly the type of material you'll find in our free practice question bank. These aren't just basic questions either. They're designed to test your deep understanding just like the real OA exam will. Now let's talk about one of the most important concepts in all of sociology, the sociological imagination. This term was created by C. Wright Mills in 1959, and it's absolutely essential for your exam. Mills defined the sociological imagination as the vivid awareness of the relationship between personal experience and the wider society. This is the key insight that sociology offers. It's about widening your perspective to understand the social forces that shape behaviour and attitudes. The sociological imagination helps you connect personal troubles to public issues. Let me explain the difference. Personal troubles are problems that affect individuals and their immediate relationships. They seem private and individual. Public issues, on the other hand, are problems that affect large numbers of people and are rooted in the organisation of society itself. The sociological imagination is the ability to see how personal troubles are often actually public issues in disguise. Let's use unemployment as an example again. When one person in a city loses their job, that's a personal trouble. That individual needs to find work and maybe they need to improve their skills or network better. But when millions of people are unemployed during an economic recession, that's a public issue. It's not about individual failings anymore, it's about the structure of the economy, government policies, corporate decisions, and broader social forces. The sociological imagination helps you make this connection. Here's another way to think about it. Emil Durkheim, one of the founders of sociology, talked about social facts. These are types of behaviour and thinking that are external to the individual, but have a compelling and coercive power over us. If you've ever looked at an outfit in your closet and thought, I can't wear that, you've experienced a social fact. Nobody's physically stopping you from wearing it, but social norms and expectations exert real power over your choices. Think about something as simple as clothing. We all recognise that society influences what we wear, but how exactly does that work? It's not just about fashion trends, it's about unwritten rules regarding what's appropriate for different situations. What you wear to a job interview versus a beach party versus a funeral are all governed by social facts. These expectations exist outside of you as an individual, but they shape your behaviour in powerful ways. I know we're covering a lot of detailed information, and you might be wondering how to practice applying all these concepts. That's precisely why I put together those 300 plus free practice questions I mentioned earlier. They'll help you work through problems that combine multiple concepts, just like you'll see on the actual exam. For your exam, you need to be able to apply the sociological imagination to different scenarios. You might be given a situation and asked to identify the social forces at work, or you might need to explain the difference between a personal trouble and a public issue. Practice thinking about everyday situations through this lens. When you see news about rising divorce rates, ask yourself, is this about individual couples failing, or are there broader social changes affecting marriage as an institution? Common mistakes students make with this concept include thinking that the sociological imagination means ignoring individual choice or responsibility. That's not it at all. It's about recognizing that individual choices happen within a social context that shapes those choices. Another mistake is confusing the sociological imagination with just being aware of society. It's more specific than that. It's about connecting the personal and the social in a systematic way. Now let's shift gears and talk about how sociology developed as a discipline. Understanding this history isn't just interesting, it's crucial for grasping why sociology approaches things the way it does. The term sociology was first used by Auguste Comte in the early 1800s. Comte is considered the founder of sociology as a method of study, and what made him revolutionary was his approach. Before Comte, philosophers like Confucius and Plato thought deeply about the nature of society, but they were primarily engaged in philosophical speculation. Comte was different. He believed that society and human social interactions could be studied scientifically, just like natural phenomena. This was a radical idea at the time. He wanted to understand the laws by which society operates, based on actual, observable evidence, much like physics operates according to certain basic laws. Comte called his approach positivism. Positivism asserts that we must understand the world around us by using observable facts derived from direct experiences with our senses. Instead of just theorizing about how society should work, Comte wanted to observe how it actually does work and then test theories systematically. He believed that by using the scientific method to test theories, we could build a true science of society. Here's what's fascinating about Comte's vision. He believed that sociology would be the last and greatest science because it would apply the scientific knowledge and methods of all the established fields, especially biology, chemistry, and physics, to predict and even control human behaviour. Now, we know today that human behaviour is far more complex than Comte imagined, and we can't control it like we can control chemical reactions. But his insistence on systematic observation and testing shaped the entire discipline. The rise of sociology as a distinct discipline happened in the 19th century during a time of massive social change. The Industrial Revolution was transforming societies. People were moving from rural areas to cities. Traditional ways of life were disappearing. New forms of work, new class structures, and new social problems were emerging. Thinkers needed new tools to understand these changes, and that's the context in which sociology was born. If some of these more advanced concepts feel challenging right now, don't worry at all. That's completely normal, and it's exactly why I created that comprehensive practice question bank. Working through those problems will help solidify your understanding and build your confidence. Now, we need to talk about the major theoretical perspectives in sociology. This is crucial for your exam because you'll definitely be asked to identify and apply these perspectives. Think of theoretical perspectives as different lenses through which you can view social phenomena. Each lens reveals different aspects of social reality, and each has strengths and limitations. The three traditional approaches are functionalism, conflict perspective, and symbolic interactionism. Let's start with functionalism. This perspective views society as a complex system whose parts work together to promote stability and solidarity. Think of society like a human body. Just as your body has different organs that each perform specific functions to keep you alive and healthy, society has different institutions that each serve important functions. The family socializes children, schools educate. The economy produces and distributes goods. Religion provides meaning and community. Functionalists ask, what function does this social phenomenon serve? How does it contribute to social stability? For example, Emil Durkheim, a key functionalist thinker, studied religion not to determine if it was true or false, but to understand what function it served in society. He found that religion brings communities together, creates shared values, and strengthens social bonds. Even crime, from a functionalist perspective, serves a function. It reinforces social norms by showing what happens when people violate them. But here's the thing, functionalism has limitations. It tends to emphasize stability and can make existing social arrangements seem natural or inevitable. It doesn't do a great job of explaining social change or conflict. It can also seem to justify inequality by suggesting that if something exists, it must serve a function. So while functionalism is valuable for understanding how social institutions maintain stability, we need other perspectives too. Now let's talk about the conflict perspective. This is almost the opposite of functionalism in many ways. While functionalism sees society as basically cooperative, the conflict perspective sees society as characterized by inequality and conflict over scarce resources. This perspective comes primarily from Karl Marx, who focused on economic inequality and class conflict. Marx saw society as divided between those who own the means of production and those who must sell their labour to survive. From a conflict perspective, social institutions don't exist to benefit everyone equally. Instead, they tend to benefit those with power and wealth at the expense of others. Laws aren't neutral. They often protect the interests of the powerful. Education doesn't just teach skills. It also reproduces class inequality by preparing different students for different positions in the economic hierarchy. Even cultural ideas and values reflect the interests of dominant groups. The conflict perspective is excellent for analysing power, inequality, and social change. It helps us understand why there's so much inequality in wealthy societies and how that inequality is maintained across generations. It's particularly useful for understanding things like racism, sexism, and economic exploitation. However, it can sometimes overemphasize conflict and underemphasize the ways people do cooperate and share common interests. Not everything is about domination and resistance. The third traditional perspective is symbolic interactionism. This one is quite different from the other two because it focuses on a much smaller scale. While functionalism and conflict theory look at large-scale social structures and institutions, symbolic interactionism focuses on everyday interactions between individuals. It asks, how do people create meaning in their daily lives through interaction and communication? Symbolic interactionism emphasizes that society is not just a thing that exists above us. It's constantly being created and recreated through our interactions with each other. We use symbols, language, gestures, and objects to communicate meaning. Through these interactions, we develop our sense of self and learn social norms. Think about how you learn what's appropriate in different situations. You watch how others behave, how they respond to you, and you adjust your behavior accordingly. George Herbert Mead, a key figure in symbolic interactionism, studied how children develop a sense of self through social interaction. He argued that we learn to see ourselves as others see us. We essentially step outside ourselves and view ourselves from the perspective of others. This is crucial for becoming functioning members of society. We learn what's expected of us by imagining how others will judge our actions. The strength of symbolic interactionism is its attention to meaning-making and the lived experience of social life. It doesn't treat people as passive recipients of social forces, but as active creators of social reality. However, it can sometimes miss the bigger picture of how large social structures constrain individual interactions. Someone might negotiate their identity in creative ways, but they're still shaped by larger forces like racism or economic inequality that symbolic interactionism alone can't fully explain. For your exam, you need to be able to recognize which perspective a question is asking about and apply the right lens. If a question asks about how social institutions maintain social order, that's functionalism. If it asks about power differences and inequality, that's conflict perspective. If it asks about face-to-face interactions and meaning-making, that's symbolic interactionism. Now, beyond these three traditional perspectives, there are important modern perspectives you need to know. Feminist sociology examines how gender inequality is built into social structures and interactions. It doesn't just study women, it studies how gender as a system affects everyone. Feminist scholars have shown how supposedly neutral social institutions actually reproduce gender inequality. They've also critiqued traditional sociology for focusing too much on men's experiences and perspectives. Intersectionality is another crucial modern perspective. It recognizes that people have multiple social identities, like race, class, gender, and sexuality, and these identities interact in complex ways to shape experiences of privilege and oppression. Someone isn't just a woman or just black or just working class. They're all of these things simultaneously, and their experiences can't be understood by looking at just one identity at a time. Postmodernism questions many of the assumptions of earlier sociological perspectives. It challenges the idea that there are universal truths or grand theories that can explain all of society. Postmodernists emphasize diversity, difference, and the role of language and culture in shaping what we think of as reality. While this perspective can seem abstract, it's pushed sociology to be more critical of its own assumptions and more attentive to voices that have been marginalized. As we wrap up this detailed overview, remember that understanding these concepts is just the first step. The real mastery comes from applying them, which is where those 300+ free practice questions become invaluable. They're completely free and designed specifically for OA exam success. Now let's talk about how sociology is actually used in the real world. This is important not just for understanding the field, but also for seeing why sociology matters. Applied sociology is the use of sociological knowledge with the intent of yielding practical applications to solve problems we face in society. This is sociology in action. By better understanding social issues, we can develop more effective solutions. Think about a problem like high crime rates in a particular neighbourhood. A purely punitive approach might just lock more people up. But applied sociology asks, what social factors contribute to crime in this area? Is it lack of economic opportunity? Weak social bonds in the community? Inadequate schools? Poor policing practices that erode trust? By understanding the social causes, we can develop interventions that actually address root problems rather than just symptoms. Many fields regularly benefit from applied sociology. In education, sociologists study why some students succeed while others struggle, looking at factors like school funding, teacher quality, peer influences, and family background. In criminal justice, they examine how the justice system itself might contribute to recidivism rather than rehabilitation. In healthcare, they study how social factors like poverty, discrimination, and social support affect health outcomes. In each case, sociological insight leads to better policies and practices. One interesting subfield is clinical sociology. Clinical sociologists work directly with individuals, groups, or organisations to facilitate change. This might look like therapy, but it's different because it explicitly addresses social relationships and social structures. A clinical sociologist might help reorganise a workplace to reduce conflict and improve cooperation, or help a community group develop strategies to address a local problem. Sociology also leads to cultural awareness and understanding. By studying the rules and norms of different societies, we learn that what seems natural or right in our own society is actually culturally specific. This helps us understand people from other cultures better and makes us more aware of our own cultural assumptions. In an increasingly globalized world, this kind of cultural competence is more important than ever. Here's a concrete example of applied sociology in action. College sociology students once proposed and created an outreach program to inspire community action. They hosted a week-long winter emergency homeless shelter right on their campus. This addressed an immediate need, but it also raised awareness among students about homelessness and challenged stereotypes. That's sociology being applied to create real change. In another example, a professional worked with women at a university in Pakistan, speaking about research methods and how to use social research and inquiry to create change in a place that often marginalizes women. This shows how sociological tools can empower people to study and address the problems they face in their own communities. Research isn't just for academics, it's a tool anyone can use to understand and change their social world. Students at another university incorporated sociology into their coursework through paid research opportunities, studying the best ways to provide sustainable services to community members. They examined things like the effectiveness of doulas, who are non-medical birthing professionals, and measured client satisfaction. This kind of research helps organisations allocate resources more effectively and ensure their programs actually meet community needs. For your exam, you should be able to explain what applied sociology is and give examples of how it's used in different fields. You should also understand the difference between basic sociology, which develops theory and conducts research to advance knowledge, and applied sociology, which uses that knowledge to address practical problems. Both are important, and they inform each other. One common mistake is thinking that applied sociology is less rigorous or less important than theoretical sociology. That's not true at all. Applied sociology uses all the same research methods and theoretical frameworks. It just directs them towards solving specific problems. Another mistake is thinking that sociology can only describe problems, not solve them. In reality, understanding social causes is the first essential step toward developing effective solutions. Let's talk about theory and research and how they work together in sociology. Theory without research is just speculation. Research without theory is just a collection of facts with no framework for understanding what they mean. Sociological theory provides us with frameworks for understanding social phenomena. It helps us ask the right questions and interpret what we observe. Research, on the other hand, provides us with systematic evidence about the social world. There are two main types of sociological research: descriptive and explanatory. Descriptive research seeks to describe social phenomena. What are the characteristics of this group? How do people in this situation typically behave? What are the patterns we can observe? For example, you might describe the demographic characteristics of college students, the values of rural households, or the behaviour patterns of social media users. Explanatory research goes a step further. It seeks to explain why social phenomena occur the way they do. Why do women earn less than men on average? How do people self-segregate into different neighbourhoods? Why do some countries have higher rates of social mobility than others? Explanatory research tries to identify causes and understand mechanisms. It tests hypotheses about relationships between different social factors. Emil Durkheim's famous study of suicide is a perfect example of how theory and research work together. Durkheim had a theory that suicide rates weren't just about individual psychology. He thought they were influenced by social factors, specifically the level of social integration and moral regulation in different groups. So he gathered data on suicide rates for different categories of people: Protestants versus Catholics, married versus unmarried, men versus women, rich versus poor. What Durkheim found was fascinating. Protestants had higher suicide rates than Catholics. Unmarried people had higher rates than married people. These patterns couldn't be explained by individual psychology alone. They revealed something about how social bonds and social norms protect people from suicide. When people are well integrated into social groups with clear norms and strong bonds, they're less likely to take their own lives. This was a groundbreaking insight. Now, Durkheim's work has been criticised by later sociologists for errors in how he gathered and interpreted evidence. This is important to understand. Science is self-correcting. Later researchers build on and critique earlier work. That's how knowledge advances. But Durkheim established something crucial. Social facts can be studied systematically, and research can reveal patterns that help us understand and predict social behaviour. For your exam, you need to understand the research process that sociologists follow. They begin by asking a question, something they want to understand about the social world. Then they review existing research to see what's already known. They develop a hypothesis, a testable prediction based on theory. They design a study to test that hypothesis, collect and analyse data, and interpret their findings. Then they share their results so other researchers can evaluate and build on their work. Research methods can be quantitative or qualitative. Quantitative research deals with factors that can be measured in numbers. Surveys, experiments, and statistical analysis of existing data are all quantitative methods. This approach is great for identifying patterns across large populations and testing specific hypotheses about relationships between variables. If you want to know whether education level correlates with income, quantitative methods are the way to go. Qualitative research offers characterizations and descriptions of social phenomena. It uses methods like interviews, participant observation, and analysis of documents or media. This approach is valuable when you want to understand the meaning people give to their experiences, when you want to study a little understood group or situation, or when the phenomenon is too complex to capture with numbers alone. If you want to understand how gang members think about violence, or how people experience homelessness, qualitative methods are essential. Don't forget to grab those free practice questions from the link in the description. With the depth of knowledge you've gained today, plus the practice from those questions, you'll be incredibly well prepared for your OA exam. Now let's tie everything together. We've covered what sociology is and what makes it unique as a discipline. We've explored the sociological imagination and how it helps us connect personal troubles to public issues. We've learned about social facts and how society exerts real power over individual behaviour. We trace the historical development of sociology as a scientific discipline, starting with Auguste Comte's vision of positivism. We examined the three major theoretical perspectives: functionalism, which sees society as an integrated system; conflict perspective, which focuses on inequality and power struggles; and symbolic interactionism, which studies everyday interactions and meaning-making. We also discussed modern perspectives like feminism, intersectionality, and postmodernism that have expanded sociology's scope. We explored how sociology is applied in the real world to address social problems and improve people's lives. And we discussed how theory and research work together, with theory providing frameworks for understanding and research providing systematic evidence about social reality. The key thing to remember is that all of these perspectives are tools. None of them gives you the complete picture by itself. Good sociologists use multiple perspectives to understand complex social phenomena. They might use functionalism to understand how an institution maintains social order, conflict theory to analyze who benefits from that institution and who doesn't, and symbolic interactionism to understand how people experience and interpret that institution in their daily lives. For your exam, practice applying these different perspectives to the same situation. Take something like education. From a functionalist view, schools socialize children, teach skills, sort people into different roles, and reinforce social values. From a conflict perspective, schools reproduce social inequality by providing better education to wealthy students and tracking working-class students into lower status positions. From a symbolic interactionist view, we might study how teacher expectations affect student performance, or how students negotiate their identities through peer interactions. The most common mistake students make on exams is confusing the different perspectives or applying the wrong one. Remember, functionalism is about stability and function, conflict is about power and inequality, and symbolic interactionism is about interaction and meaning. If you keep these core focuses in mind, you'll be able to identify which perspective fits any given scenario. Another common mistake is thinking that one perspective is right and the others are wrong. Sociology isn't like that. Each perspective reveals different aspects of social reality. The question isn't which is right, but which is most useful for understanding this particular phenomenon. Sometimes you need multiple perspectives to get a full understanding. Here's a memory aid to help you keep the perspectives straight. Think FAM. F for functionalism, which focuses on how parts fit together. C for conflict, which focuses on competition and inequality. S for symbolic interactionism, which focuses on small-scale social interactions. Picture a family. Functionalism sees how each member plays a role, conflict sees the power struggles, and symbolic interactionism sees the daily conversations that create family meaning. As you prepare for your exam, make sure you can do several things. First, define key concepts like sociology, sociological imagination, and social facts in your own words. Second, explain the difference between personal troubles and public issues with examples. Third, describe the historical emergence of sociology and the role of positivism. Fourth, compare and contrast the three major theoretical perspectives. Fifth, explain how sociology is applied to address real-world problems. And sixth, understand how theory and research work together in the discipline. Remember that sociology is fundamentally about seeing familiar things in new ways. It challenges us to look beyond individual explanations and see the social patterns and forces that shape our lives. It reveals that things we think are natural or inevitable are actually socially constructed and can change. This perspective is powerful not just for passing exams, but for understanding the world you live in and your place within it. As you work through the practice questions available in the description, pay attention to how they ask you to apply concepts rather than just recall definitions. The exam will test your ability to think sociologically, not just memorize facts. Practice taking everyday situations and analysing them through different theoretical lenses. Practice identifying social forces that might be shaping individual behaviour. Practice distinguishing between description and explanation, between personal troubles and public issues. One final piece of advice. Don't just memorise names and dates. Understand the ideas. Know why Comte's positivism was revolutionary. Understand why Mills thought the sociological imagination was so important. Grasp why we need multiple theoretical perspectives. When you understand the ideas, you can apply them to situations you haven't seen before, which is exactly what the exam will ask you to do. You now have a comprehensive foundation in the basics of sociology. You understand what sociology is, how it developed, and the major ways sociologists think about the social world. You know about the sociological imagination and how it helps us see connections between individual experiences and social structures. You can explain the major theoretical perspectives and their strengths and limitations. and you understand how sociology is applied to address real problems and improve people's lives. The practice questions in the description will help you cement this knowledge and develop your ability to apply it. They're designed to mirror the types of questions you'll see on your actual exam, so working through them is one of the best ways to prepare. Don't just do them once, come back to them multiple times. Each time you review, you'll understand the concepts more deeply and see connections you missed before. Good luck with your exam preparation. With the solid foundation you've built today and consistent practice with the question bank, you're well on your way to success. Remember, sociology isn't just about passing a test. It's a powerful lens for understanding your world and your place in it. As you continue your studies, keep asking those sociological questions. What social forces are at work here? Who benefits and who doesn't? How do people create meaning in this situation? These questions will serve you well, both on your exam and in life. You've got this.